Yo, what up, everybody? This is another episode of House of Aten, with your boy AK. Lots been happening, chilling. So today I'm representing Miles College. One of the things that we got to talk about, I think one of the things we got to get back to, man, it's crazy because uh, I don't see people rocking like HBCU paraphernalia. I don't see people wearing. So the other day I had on like a Haiti shirt, right? You see my Haitian flag, definitely sending in solidarity with them while they're all dealing with the issues with TPS. I just saw there was another extension. I think the next extension was to July 27th. So, power forward is going to be definitely a hurdle while they deal with this issue, especially, with it being TPS. But part of the reasons and some of the reasoning why I think that they should still be able to maintain that status is because of the gang issues, the political issues. Right now, Haiti doesn't even have a president. They could potentially have an election that happens in 2027, but there's a lot that goes into that. Just dealing with the state of the nation right now, with the chaos, like I said, the gang infestation, of controlling it, the life really not being as safe, especially in areas like Port-au-Prince, because I want to make sure that I specify that area because remember, Haiti is a country and they have they have the north, they have the south, so many different areas. So there are some other places around there, but I think you have to talk about the collective issue of what's going on and how people's lives exist in one of those areas as to where there is the most turmoil. So because of that, we have to keep that at the forefront and deal with those aspects of it, especially while America is accepting the white South Africans and encouraging white South Africans to come here. So it seems very hypocritical and contradictory. But I'm not here to really talk about that. But I always just, want to make sure that I do give some type of acknowledgement to that particular situation. And but I got to go through and I want to make sure that I update this video so I can change. This was from the last video that I did, so I want to make sure that I change the title of it real quick. So let me do that, and then we gonna definitely get into this conversation. All right, so change this real quick. What do I want to call this? Let me see. So for now, I'm just gonna call it supporting black brands. I might change it to something else later, but let me make sure. Let me get back to this. Let me reload it real quick just to make sure that that has updated. Yep. All right. So supporting black brands. So yeah. So what I want to talk about is y'all see me, like I said, I'm in a Miles t-shirt, and this is a HBCU that is in Alabama. And what I am noticing in this day and age, right, is that we are not we have this issue, it seems, where we're not supporting or we're apprehensive of supporting things that we may feel like is outside of our culture or maybe outside of our experience, though we are in the black culture, so-called black culture. Again, if y'all been watching this channel, you know how I feel about the term black, but I use it because that is just something that we're using right now. But definitely the education is coming on the use of the word black versus African American and all those dynamics, right? So let's just focus for a minute. And I can remember growing up watching Martin. I can remember growing up watching the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You Got a Different World. And all the cast living single, all the cast and the stars in these particular shows, they will rock HBCU attire, right? And I was in Orlando recently and I was going to this kava bar and I had on a Morehouse shirt. And this guy asked me, he was like, oh, he was like, okay. He was like, you went to Morehouse? What class did you go? He made an assumption just because I had on a shirt. And I was like, oh, no, I ain't go to Morehouse. And he gave me this look. And I can tell that he wanted to say something along the lines of like, well, why are you wearing a Morehouse shirt if you didn't go there? And it's funny because going on these other campuses, you will see people, and especially even our people, you'll see people wear Harvard shirts, you'll see people wear Yale shirts, you'll see people wear other universities that they may not have gone to, and nobody says anything, right? Nobody makes an assumption. The other thing you'll see too is you'll see people wear shirts that say Paris, and people won't assume that they're Parisian. You'll see people that have on shirts that's for France, and people won't assume that they're French. But if I put on a Ghanaian shirt, or if I put on a Haiti shirt, or any other country, then or Nigerian shirt, right? It's as if there is this forcing to say that if I'm not from there, then I shouldn't necessarily have that on. And I think that that comes from this wanting to protect and wanting to wrap our arms around those places where we're from, because there is, of course, an important and deep history, but there's also this struggle and strife that comes from there. And I'm a huge proponent of, I don't think that you should just wear things and not know the story behind it. You know, if you're wearing the Ghanaian shirt, you should understand the flag's colors and what the black star represents. Or if you're wearing a Haitian shirt, right, you should understand the red, what that represents, what the blue represents, why the white was taken out the middle. You know, you should understand the story and history behind who some of their pioneers are, because they actually fought for this ability to be free and to have this recognition that then did inspire other people. If you're talking about Denmark Vesey, or if you're talking about what President Boyer did in, I think it was 1824, 1825, by opening up Haiti to African Americans that were in the United States that were enslaved, for them to, if they were able to escape, you know, for them to be able to come to Haiti. Or the fact that the Haitians beat up Napoleon Bonaparte, which then opened up the opportunity for Thomas Jefferson to purchase a vast land in America through the Louisiana Purchase, and why America was able to expand, right? So I believe that you should wear it and you should know something about what you have on. But and I also think that we have to get to this sense of cultural pride, this branding, this acceptance, and get comfortable wearing these other countries and other HBCUs, because these were the schools that were created for us to advance our education and opportunity despite us attending, right? I think that's one form of support. And I do think that there should be other forms of support as well. But if a person has that on, it shouldn't be so foreign for them to be able to wear it and to do so. That's just something I think that we have to get back to, because we do it for everything else and it's accepted. And to me, it's a little weird, right? But I think, you know, I'm a person who wants to create change, who wants to inspire change. And so, hey, that's what I do, you know. So our celebrities were doing that at one point. We moved past that and we need to get back to it. So you going out to the club, you going shopping, you going grocery shopping, you're going to a concert, you know, we can get back into representing the vastness of the diaspora and the vastness of our diversity for what makes us a African, Pan-African, Black, American, whatever culture, right? So now let me change gears and let's get into that, right? Let's get into this whole African American Black thing, and you know, there's this FBA movement, and I can't lie to you, I'm disappointed in Tariq Nasheed, bro. I'm disappointed in Tariq Nasheed because he is the one who is putting forth this FBA, this foundational Black American idealism, and identity, right? And I for sure appreciate Tariq Nasheed's work and appreciate his documentaries that he had out with the Hidden Colors, and you know, watching those documentaries, I watched those things like years back. I thought it was some great stuff that was in there. But all right, now here's the critique. it's to me it's a little disconnected, and I think it's a little disingenuous, right? Because like I said, he pretty much popularized this term I think around 2019. And what's happening is I think that a lot of our scholars are dying off, right? Um, are people who did advanced studies into the origins of Africa. Those people like Theophile Obenga, Sheikh Anta Diop, John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben. We can go on and on and on, right? Anthony Browder. These people who did these deep dives and these digs to establish the connection of us as black people in this land connected to that vast, important, powerful history and discovery that happened on the continent. And I say it's disingenuous because when these people were alive, you weren't hearing this. And even today, you're starting to hear it a lot more. And I think they're taking advantage of the people who are able to debate, source, and really check them on this misinformation are no longer around. So because a lot of us have not done our research, we have not gained a true understanding of the history and the nuance with it, then I think that they are trying to frame and they're trying to create this new pathway. And I have issue with it because as they spoke about the origins, you look at the origins of the creation of the word black and you to describe us, it was as a pejorative, right? This is when they started to separate the races because they wanted to be able to create this institution of slavery. And so you have these Europeans, these people like Carl Linnaeus, you have Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, you have Leclerc, you have Arthur de Gobineau, you have Samuel Morton, and these people were the ones who were trying to separate and create a hierarchy among humans, right? Among humanity. So they created the Caucasian, the Mongolian, the Malayan, the Ethiopian, and the American, right? And they gave them distinct characteristics, but right, those characteristics were flawed. So when you look at people like Carl Linnaeus creates Europus or Homo sapien Asiaticus, and he gives them these characteristics to say like, okay, well, the whites, the Europus, which is Europeans, were governed by glory, they were governed by conquest, they were governed by intellectualism, they were governed by laws. But then when you come to the Homo sapien Afro or Africanus, then he says things like they were governed by greed, they were governed by caprice, they were lazy, sluggish. And so as they coin those terms to represent black, they wanted to create negativities against us. And so, and it goes on and on and on. And you can look up those different people, especially when you deal with people like Samuel Morton, who was trying to determine our inferiority based off of our skull size, not based off of our brains, based off of our skull size. And he was essentially after he collected all of these skulls, and right, I think some of these skulls are still at some of these universities. After these people died, and he was essentially came in long story short, a conclusion and summary was that he said based off your skull size that determines your intellectual capacity. And so since black people had smaller skull sizes, that meant that we were dumb. And this is how they started to create this pseudoscience into this concept of scientific racism to then justify our enslavement or our place in humanity as being inferior. And so this where you get this term black from, remember black is everything negative. So they're changing or creating again these narratives around it. So now you tell what is it for black? Black represents the devil. Black, if you tell a lie and it's just a small lie, it's not really that deep, it's a little white lie. Or Um, what's some of the other ones? Let me see here real quick because I had to take notes and stuff to write all of this stuff down so that I make sure I wouldn't lose my train of thought. But the dark is a scary place to be, right? You don't want to be caught out at night in a sense of darkness. You know, they associate us, they call us darky. When you're mourning in death, it's surrounded around black. And if you look at some other cultures, you'll notice that when they have funeral processions, they're actually in white, or they'll cover their bodies in white to ward off the evil spirits and things. Or black also represents sin. When you do things illegally, it's on the black market. When you're doing a magic, such as, they wanted to classify voodoo as being strictly evil, right? So it's called black magic. Um, Death, all of that. There's these things, the black sheep of the family. So us then trying to adopt the phrase black, and we're understanding and knowing how black was such a pejorative term that's used against us. I don't understand it. In addition to that, when you look at black on the map, right? And where is black land at? Where is our tie? And that's why you have this whole concept of like African American. So I'm gonna change gears. I'm gonna get into the African American and where that comes from. I hear people say all the time, I'm not African American. I don't have no ties, no lineage, no connection to Africa. I ain't been there. I ain't got no family that's there, whatever. And they try to use this to disassociate themselves with being African, and then saying that either A, they're indigenous, which, hey, not saying there weren't indigenous people. There's another conversation that we need to have about the indigenous connection of us being here in this land and being in the Americas. That is very much so taken away from us. That's blanketed. They took us out. That's what the whole Dawes Rose is, where you get the $5 Indian, because they want to take us out because they didn't want us to benefit and have any association with that. We could talk about the Seminole Indians. Florida State is called the Seminoles. I always joke and always say, fam, you should have been called the Seminoles instead of the Rattlers. If you know the story of Black Seminoles, and with that name, Seminoles coming from Cimarron, which means runaways, and we know how slaves went to other Indian, Native American groups and tribes and united and have families through that. And that's why some of us have Indian and or Native American blood running through our veins right now. Right. So that definitely needs to be explored, and that is real. However, most of us don't know that connection, that story, and we cannot trace that lineage to that. And also understand too that there were Africans who were blending with Native Americans. And so now you have mixed races that are coming, or mixed groups that are coming out, but that doesn't take away your African blood that's coming in from you, right? And I always tell people, you got to think about this. Your life, your family didn't start in the middle of existence, right? There were people who have been coming together in unions for thousands of years. And if those groups do not formulate a union and have children, you would not be here. So you trying to disconnect yourself from the continent and from those people, all because we got caught up in this very nasty, degrading, oppressive existence or system known as slavery, where we don't have the benefit of attaching or following our lineage because we were so messed up and taken away, does not take away the fact that you have some African at some point running through your veins, right? In your lineage. Now, here's the other thing that I'll add on. The other weird thing is that, hey, don't forget black. I told you where black comes from. It's Europeans who created this. So in the whole entire existence of you wanting to be revolutionary and get away from the white man, you're still adopting the ideology and the terms that was used on you. But I kind of lost my train of thought. You're still using those terms that were used on you, and so you're still accepting it. But okay, but the next thing too is the term American. So you say, I'm a black American, I'm American, I'm American, I'm American. Okay, you still realize that you're adopting the phraseology, the ideology of a European, an Italian at that, by the name of Amerigo Vespucci. That's who America is named after. So while you're fighting to be American, 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 please understand that you want to distort yourself from Africa. You're still trying to idolize and come up under this concept of whiteness that is still naming and framing you. Remember, the name America was first used in 1507 by Martin Waldschmuller, who was a German cartographer, and it was based on Vespucci's Latinized first name, Americus. That's where it comes from. That is the history of America. So you still can't get, I mean, unless you just want to be named and you want to be coined and phrased by white people, I mean, that's where it is. So when they came up with this concept of African, mind you, African American, Afro American, that has been used for a long time. It did not start with Jesse Jackson. That is misappropriated as mishistory. Did not start with him. Popularized it, coined it, used the phrase, but you had Afro American being used way before then. When you talk about Prince Hall and you have the Free African Societies, Prince Hall Freemasonry. Their first lodge was known as African Lodge. So you see this understanding, attachment with the legacy of Africa being in the DNA of those who were closer to the struggle. It's not until later on down the line, more recently, that you're starting to try to find this detachment with it. And I think that a lot of it comes from the hate that has been experienced by those of African descent towards Black Americans. I think it comes from some experiences that people read about but not actually experienced themselves. I think it's come from the fact that, especially I think in places like New York, like Harlem, you'll find Africans who don't necessarily want to build and collaborate and go into business with Black Americans. And so there is this tension that exists. But that tension is also coming because if you use that, what do we say about white Americans in our experience up under them? If that's the bar that we're using as to why we want to formulate the hate and the disassociation with them. And then second, the other thing too is, say that we do start our business, we start our communities, and even history shows it's collaboration that worked at the best when we were finding our opportunities to be solvent and to be successful, right? It was mass collaboration. But say that we do want to formulate our own society, we want to do business. America, what resources are we going to get from America? Right? Because you have to engage in trade. You have to engage in raw materials. You have to engage in this sourcing in order for you to create these textiles or the warehouses or these products and things that we're going to build. And one of the best places that we can do that is on the continent of Africa. And this is why I think you see a lot of other ethnicities, whether it's Indian, I'm talking about Indians from over in India, whether you see it's the Asians with the Chinese, or you see other Europeans, all of them have created these partnerships and businesses. A lot of it styled through the system, the systemic issues, and the colonization, imperialism, and control that they have warranted on the continent of Africa. They have wielded on the continent of Africa through, again, that treacherous history. But nonetheless, they're building and forming these relationships in trade agreements and things. And when you look at the history as we were fighting for our rights, our civil rights over here, you equally see that it just lines up with the independence of these other ethnic groups, right? So when you look at Ghana and Kwame Nkrumah, when they get their independence, you see that's in the 60s or late 50s. I think it might have been 1957 or it might have been somewhere in the 60s. But if you look at a lot of those dates for the independence of a lot of those African countries, it happens in the 60s. There was this inspiration that was occurring a global inspiration. So then you look at Jamaica when they get their independence, right? And these other areas. Let me pull up some of these so we can go through. Um, and I think that the goal is to keep us fighting against each other so that we don't formulate these. Yeah, Ghana was 1957. So that we don't formulate these partnerships because they want to keep us in an economic depression and be able to control us. So when you look at the 60s, you got Sierra Leone 1961, Kenya 1963, Malawi 1964, Zambia 1964, Uganda 1962, Botswana 1966, Gambia 1965. So look at what's happened. 1964, that Civil Rights Act of 1964 gets passed. 1965, that's the Voting Rights of 1965 that gets passed. You have the Hart-Celler Act. This is what allows immigrants. I think that was 1968 or let me see, 1965. All right, abolishes discriminatory national origins quota systems that favor Northern and Western Europeans since the 1920s. So this is what essentially starts to allow for other ethnic groups to even come into America, because when we're fighting for the civil rights, we're not only just fighting for our benefit, right? We're fighting for others to be able to come in here and have an opportunity at the American dream. Shout out to Fred Hampton, because the thing that made Fred Hampton so dangerous was he was uniting and building relationships with people from all different backgrounds, and that scared America, because he was showing how that unity and that power, if we find one common enemy, we can end up overthrowing it. They didn't want that to happen, right? So they assassinated the young brother who was only 21 years old on December 4th, 1969. So, you know, I think we have to start to dispel some of these narratives that's out there. And then we have to also ask, at what benefit or at what detriment does us having all of these negative insights, these negative interactions, how does that hinder our goal towards freedom, financial solvency, and creating a more collective, unified community? Well, we have to have those conversations, because I don't think we are, but I do think that we have a lot of pent up aggression, or we have not went through history, understood history, and got an understanding on the story, right? And one of the other things too that I see happening a lot of times between these FBA African conversations, right? We gotta go back to slavery, is they talk about how the Ashanti were the ones who were selling, because they always talk about like Africans sold other Africans, as if we were all one whole collective monolith. I think the collective monolith is the goal now. Back then, that wasn't necessarily the case, but I'm not even trying to get into the complexities of the arguments with that, because that'll make the video like an hour long to really understand how these different villages warring with each other. But the one question to put this in a proper posture and a proper framing is, how do we see the disconnect between Black Americans and how we kill each other? Remember, the leading cause of death for African American men, I think 21 to 40, is homicide. It means death at the hands of another Black man. So essentially, we're showing this personality trait that if we had the opportunity to sell each other out, we would sell each other out too, because we kill each other, we harm each other, we rob from each other, we lie to each other in this day and age. So how do you then dismiss that, but then you put a higher responsibility and level of accountability on the past, and you expect them to act different, even though we know that they had a lot of different groups and a lot of different tribes? But here we're up under this larger umbrella of this unity of Black American. And I ain't even talking about bringing Caribbean Americans into this at all. I'm talking about just straight up Black Americans. But if you live in the city of Detroit And if you from 7 Mile and this other person is from 6 Mile, y'all may go at war with each other. Or if you from the west side and they from the east side, y'all may go at war with each other and have this disconnect and not be on the same team. That has always baffled me because we watch the way we treat each other now and we just miss it or whatever. But then we want to jump on the people in the past and say some type of way that they should have known better, even though they were being introduced with different religions, because a lot of times too it came from a religious aspect where once they were inspired or fell up under the religion of Islam, if you weren't a Muslim, then they owe no allegiance and alliance to you. Same thing with Christianity, which is why you get the doctrine of discovery, which therefore then allows Europeans to go to Africa and to come to the Americas and end up colonizing these areas because of under doctrine of discovery. It says that they can go into any non-Christian land, which shows you that Africans was not practicing Christianity on a widespread basis like that. Because if they were, then they wouldn't have been able to go into those places of Africa where they went, plant their flag, and begin to colonize and take over. So that ideology and mindset shows that they weren't all just one people or weren't up under the same umbrella and mindset to have this collective unity with each other. So I think that that's another important thing that needs to be explored and talked about as well. So if I was just to summarize, this, let me say one more thing. And also look at the trajectory of the use of the word. So you go from, you start to get the term black, then you get, African Americans kind of thrown in there, doesn't get popularized till later, but then you get Negro, right? So Negro, which in Spanish and Portuguese just means black, so it's just another language. But you have Black Americans here who wanted to be called Negro and said, you need to give me the respect and you need to capitalize the N. Put some respect on my name and my classification. And there was a time where you could not call a person black. You call your great grandmother black, she was liable to slap the taste out of your mouth. Didn't want to be called black. So then you started to get Stokely Carmichael with Snick, and then you end up getting the Black Power movement, and you end up getting James Brown coming out with the song Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, because people didn't want to be called black, so they're trying to create this empowerment up under the name black. Then you get Jesse Jackson, who coins the name African American because he is trying to connect historically, not saying that you have a direct descendant, but saying from a historical landmass that we have a connection to that vast continent of Africa that was not 54 countries before the Berlin Conference and the scramble for Africa, but those boundaries end up getting drawn when European nations want to split Africa up for their own conquest and to separate the people, and then started to implant in them a hierarchy among the African people based off of who their colonizers were. And so when you use these terms now, as far as Ghana, Nigeria, this and that, remember that comes from out of the 60s, or sorry, that comes from, well, yeah, you could say the 60s, but it comes pretty much after 1884 or whenever the Berlin Conference was, when they had these boundaries that was drawn up to begin to separate them. Remember, the way that I conquer you is for me to divide you. Once I divide you on language, I divide you on religion, I divide you on ideology, I divide you on class, I divide you on ability, inability, characteristics that were then put on them. Once I can divide you, Willie Lynch letter, then that means I can begin to create fractures and I can begin to take you over and you all to see differences within yourself and not want to work together, and I can continue to exploit the resources. All to the fact that where, again, if I rock a HBCU shirt and I didn't go there, regardless if I went to college at all or if I went to a PWI, that then people give looks to say, that's a little weird that you're wearing that shirt, but you didn't go there, although you are of the culture. We got work to do. Just wanted to put that on your mind real quick. Let me know your thoughts, and definitely look forward to the dialogue. Remember, this is all in an effort to heal, repair, and to work towards a collective goal, not to break down, but to build up and figure out how we navigate that. So shout out to y'all if y'all here for building and trying to make our situation better by actively doing things, and then also digging into the books and the research and not being intellectually lazy. Because I do think some people are being intellectually lazy, and they're thinking just because they retain the black skin or dark skin, that then gives them credence and credit to articulate the story without having done the proper research. So